Hello everybody, welcome to our very first Q&A, live recorded at Rex's Gym. Now, first of all, thank you very much for all the great questions you guys sent in. I will not get to them all, but if I haven't gotten to your question, I'll make sure I'll reply to it anyway, but in a more one-on-one fashion. I plan to do these every Thursday, so if you have any questions, just send them in, and when things go back to relative normalcy, I'll also include good questions I get during the sessions as well. So without further ado, let's jump into some of the questions that we've got. Now, the first question is, how do I get rid of belly fat? This, honestly, might be the question that over my career, and believe it or not, this year I've been doing this for 20 years, I've gotten the most. Like, how do I get rid of this here? And it usually comes with, I do a lot of crunches, or I do a lot of planks, or I do these twisty machines at the gym. Now, the first thing to realize, I'm just gonna say it's impossible to localize fat burning. You just can't do it. So you cannot say, I'm gonna lose fat here before I'm gonna lose fat here. That's just something that your body, that glorious machine that you walk around in, chooses all for themselves. Now, there is a stream in nutrition and fitness that calls itself biohacking. And their idea is that where you hold your fat, where you store your fat mainly, is governed by your hormones. So if you can manipulate your hormones, you can manipulate where you lose your fat. Now, as far as I can tell, given the research, my experience right now, it doesn't work. But that is my opinion from what I've seen, what I've read up on the research. It just doesn't work. Like I've never seen this go in any sort of significant way. So unfortunately, there's no way to really choose that's where I'm gonna lose weight unless you do liposuction. Now that's outside of the scope here, of course. So one image I want to give you is, because often it is like, oh, I'm holding fat here and I'm doing a lot of these tricep exercises to get rid of it. It doesn't seem to work. No, it doesn't. If you have an area you want to lose fat, training the muscles underneath that fat is not going to do much. And this is why. Let's say I am training my triceps. That tricep muscle, which is everything is connected, of course, but it's kind of separate from the fat itself. That tricep muscle kind of runs out of energy. So it's going to send a signal to the central nervous system saying, hey, I need more energy. Free up some energy. That energy that signal is going to travel through the body. Appropriate hormones and appropriate substances are going to get loosed into the system to create that energy for that muscle. So for instance, there might be sugar molecules in the liver or in your muscles that are stored, that get transferred around the body, and whatever muscle needs it will grab it out of the bloodstream. Or you're gonna take the energy out of fat cells, and again, whatever muscle needs it pulls it out of the bloodstream. So by the time that comes around, that signal and all those hormones and molecules have gone through the entire body. So it's not that muscle is just going to say, I'm going to grab it from right there. Your body does not work that way. So the best thing to do is train your large muscle groups, because they're going to burn a lot more calories and they're going to have a bigger impact on freeing some of that energy. And do as well as you can in the kitchen, because like fat loss is done mainly in the kitchen. Nutrition plays such a big role in this, guys. So having said that, you can't say I'm gonna lose it here, so I'm gonna do a lot of crunches. Doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, it would be easier if it did. Now, same person also asked if I can talk a little bit more about breathing during exercise. Now, this is a very interesting one given what we're doing right now, because a lot of you that train with me in the gym, I teach a certain way to breathe under load. So let's say you're doing a squat, or you're doing a deadlift, or you're doing a kettlebell swing. Because we're moving load and because there's weight on the body, we have to be very stiff and very tight. We talk a lot about this tightness. And a certain way of breathing that comes with it, it's what we call that active breathing. So, and that's what you hear a lot when you go into the studio as well. People breathe like that. They brace, which is how you want to move and how you want to breathe when there is a heavy load on the body. However, we're doing a lot of body weight work here. During a body weight squat, where you're just squatting with nothing but the weight that you have, you don't really need to be that tight. So I don't talk about it a lot in the home workouts, because it's not as important in this situation. So yes, if we're gonna squat a heavy weight, deadlift a heavy weight, even bench press, like, we want to be as stiff and as tight as we can. But for a lunge, it's not as important. If we're gonna put 60 kilos on your back and do that lunge, yeah, we need a lot more stiffness. But for body weight, it's a lot less. That's why I don't talk about it as much. But it is a great question. Now, here's what I want you to do for breathing. Breathe. Because if you don't, you're going to run out of air, and that's bad for your health. Number two, try to have some sort of rhythm. It's very normal to start holding your breath when stuff gets hard. It also makes it harder more often than not. And then if you have that rhythm and you are breathing, a good way to do it is when you lift the weight up, in this case your body weight more often than not, breathe out. When you move the weight down, breathe in. That'll also help with determining that rhythm. I hope that helps. Now, next question. How to not lose strength when you have access to minimal equipment. Now, this is coming from somebody who is training for powerlifting. So in powerlifting, your goal is to move the heaviest weight you can in the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift. Now, how to not lose that peak strength with minimal equipment, I'm not gonna lie, it's very hard. It's very hard to do that. To do that, you really have to pursue the calisthenic versions of these lifts. So for instance, a bench press, where you lower the barbell to your chest and then you press it back up to arm's length, is very similar to a push-up. Yeah. But when I perform a very heavy bench press, for me with a challenging weight, and I can do that once, maybe twice, but if I do a push-up, I can do that a lot more than two. So how to mimic that is you make the calisthenics, so the body weight exercise, harder. But you can also only do that to a certain extent. So that peak strength that you train for in powerlifting, Olympic lifting, strongman in certain instances, you're not really going to get that too much with body weight movements. You're just not. Your best bet is to maintain your muscle mass, because if you have your muscle mass, the ability to produce force will still be there. Yeah. If you have bench press, let's say 60 kilos, and you don't bench press for a couple of weeks, a couple of months maybe, but you're maintaining that muscle mass and you're training your pressing strength with things like push-ups and dips, and if you have dumbbells, dumbbell bench press, you will not lose too much strength. Now, you might still have to practice the skill of lifting the heavy weight, because that's something different, but that doesn't mean you've lost the strength. You just need to regain the skill of lifting heavy. Now, anybody who's ever really gone for a heavy lift can tell you this. It is a different sort of animal to lift a heavy bench press for one, than to do a dumbbell bench press for 10 reps. It's just different. You need to be a lot, again, there's the stiffness, there's the tightness, and you have to be comfortable with the weight in your hands, and that's gonna take a little bit. So even though that peak strength, that skill of lifting that heaviest weight might fall off a little bit, your best bet is not to make your muscle mass fall off. So if you come back and you can still, let's say right now you can do 8 great push-ups chest to the ground all the way up. If by the time we can go back to the gym, you can do 15 great push-ups, or you can do 8 great push-ups with a weight on your back, you know your muscles have gotten stronger. And given a couple of weeks back on the barbell, that will translate on the bar as well. Now, I hope that helps. This is a great question. How do you push yourself as hard when training by yourself compared to training with a trainer? And this is a tough one. This is a tough one for me to answer because I train by myself. And that's how I prefer it. That's how I've often done it. And I don't necessarily feel like I train harder when there's somebody there. But I'm going to go a different route with this one, and I'm going to say it has a lot to do with why you're training. If you know why you're there, and if you know the reason of why you're putting yourself through that training, that's a bad way of putting it, because it sounds like something negative when it isn't. If you have a strong why, you'll be okay. You'll be fine. And it is also a good thing at this point to remind yourself to be a little bit kind to yourself. Like, it is a weird situation that we're in, for us here in the ACT, where we haven't really dealt with this yet. Even last year, we can go to the ovals. You can still do your sessions with supervision. Now you can't, so you're just getting your feet wet with this. We're a week in. Like, cut yourself some slack. You're doing great just doing the sessions. So give yourself a pat on the back, and then try to think, okay, why am I doing this? Like, why do you train? And if you have a strong enough why, you'll get yourself through the workouts. And if you find out, like, I have no idea why I'm doing this, fantastic. Start thinking about it. Because that is the sort of stuff that creates the habit of training no matter what happens. I hope that helps. Then I got a great question. Why is it easier to hold a downward dog for a minute than it is to hold a plank for 30 seconds? Now, for those who don't know, the downward dog is where you pike up, so your hips are high, your arms are extended, and you hold yourself up, so you're kind of like a triangle off the ground, where the plank, you're flat. Now, there can be a couple of different reasons why one is easier or harder than the other. With the plank, what we're trying to create is we're trying to create the long lever arm from where your elbows are to where your toes are on the ground. In the middle of that lever, what is there? What's the point? It has to work the hardest is your core. Now, when you pike up, the core doesn't have to work as hard. Like, the work is being done much more by the shoulders in that position, because they have to hold yourself up. The core itself is not too far away from the lever, if that makes sense. Very, very sciencey this. So you're shifting the objective of the exercise. Where the objective of the plank is to train your core, the objective of the downward dog is a lot more to do with mobility, flexibility. Doesn't mean that the downward dog is easier for everyone, because if you have a lot of trouble holding that position here, the downward dog is a lot of hard work. If you don't have the range of motion to straighten your arms out here, and you're here, those elbows can't lock out and you're constantly lifting your body weight here. So it doesn't mean that one is always easier than the other, but for you it definitely might be because it is a different position. I hope that helps. If it doesn't, let me know, of course. Now, I have one more question. What is the best way to train your core? And the answer is there is no best way. Now, how I read this was, what's the best exercise? Now, to me, there is no best exercise because as soon as you get very good at an exercise, it's really is time to move on to a different one. But if you ask me what are my guiding principles to train the core, is I try to focus on maintaining a neutral core position. So you won't very often do crunches and side bends and that sort of stuff with me. I'll throw it in every now and then because I think it's important to have that ability, but the main bulk of the core training that I do is maintaining position, which is planks, which is side planks. It can be a suitcase carry with one hand. It can be a bird dog or a dead bug to maintain stability through that lumbar spine and hip position. So that's what I try to do. And then determining that, like 80% of my core work is being done around maintaining that position of the spine. Then I look at, okay, how can the spine bend and how should we train the spine to resist those movements? Now, one thing, the spine can flex, it can hunch over. So it's important that the core can resist that and maintain upright. And a thing like a hinge, where we hinge from the hips, if you relax, you just flop over. So the core has to work to keep you nice and straight and to keep that spine straight. Another thing that the core can do is it can extend, so flex backwards. Very common thing that we do is we do a plank where we try to prevent that flexing and that caving into the back, or an inchworm or a dead bug. Like, that's all stuff to try to stop that from happening. Now the core can also side bend, side plank to prevent that, because collapsing in the side plank is that, so we have to maintain that proper posture. The core can rotate, so we do, a couple of days ago we did that reach through where we rotate through the hip and try to maintain a stiff core. In the gym we often do like a pull-off press or something where you have to resist that rotation, or most of you have done a one-arm dumbbell press with me where we also try to prevent that rotation. So 80% of the work on the core that I do is maintaining a stiff spine. And it doesn't mean that there is no place for any movement, because your body is able to move that way. So you should have that ability, and to put a little bit of fitness on that is absolutely fine. But the way that the science tells us right now, maybe this will change, it looks like excessive movement of the spine, especially under load, can actually cause some wear and tear. So I try to stay away from that a little bit, and I try to focus a little bit more on staying very straight. Something that really made sense to me, if your abs were made for bending the spine, they will look like your hamstrings. They don't. They look very different, so they probably have a different function as well. They just make a lot of sense for me. I hope that helps. If you need any more tips or any more exercises, please let me know. All right, guys, that's about 20 minutes. I think that'll do for today. Keep your questions coming in because I'll be doing another one of these next week. I hope this was helpful. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.